Hey there! I forgot that you were scheduled to be here. uh, don't ask, it's a long story. Welcome to Werezilla's Retrospective. I'm your host, Werezilla. Now that we've talked about one of Universal's most famous monsters, it's time to talk about another one, Dracula. Of course, vampires, undead monsters who rise from their coffins to drink human blood, existed for hundreds of years before Bram Stoker wrote his novel, though it was this particular story that created the most iconic characters in vampire fiction. That people don't make fun of. Well, most of the time. Indeed, Dracula has appeared in more movies than any fictional character ever, with the exception of Sherlock Holmes. Even in movies that promise he wouldn't be in them. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Much like what Universal did with Frankenstein, they brought Dracula to the big screen and obviously started this trend. Dracula's Daughter, yet another sequel to a movie whose source material didn't have one, may not be as well remembered, but did get away with things that most movies couldn't for years afterwards, namely having lesbian undertones. And the following movie, Son of Dracula, would lead to more lore being passed on throughout the history of vampires. Undeserved in such things, but again, I'm getting ahead of myself. We open with Dr. Brewster, waiting for one Count Alucard. He's not on the train he was expected on, but at least his luggage has arrived.
D-R-A-C. What are you mumbling about? Nothing, just a silly idea hit me.
It's called spelled backwards!
No, I'm not an idiot. I know this came first. It was meant to be a fucking joke. Indeed, this is the origin for this kind of quote-unquote twist. Anyway, next we see sisters Catherine and Claire, also talking about Alucard, who is meant to be a guest for their rich father's party.
There are other means of communication.
Oh, please, Kay. No lectures on metaphysics tonight, huh?
You should allow your mind to explore the unknown, Claire. Then you wouldn't laugh at telepathy. I know Count Alucard will be here tonight, without benefit of telephone.
Gee, that wasn't suspicious at all. Anyway, to confirm her theory, Catherine goes to talk to a gypsy. For even a man who is pure of heart says his prayers by night, may become a wolf when the wolf bane blooms and the autumn moon is bright. Just kidding, though the gypsy does warn Catherine to stay away from Alucard, and then gets killed by a toy bat. Anyway, the party begins, all while Lon Chaney Jr. watches. Get used to that expression, it doesn't change throughout the entire film. During the party, we meet Catherine's fiancé, Frank, who she's finding herself distant to. It would seem Alucard is driving a wedge between the two, to which Frank reveals some troubling news.
Alucard is an imposter, a fake.
How can you say such a thing?
I wrote to Senator Manfield. His reply informed me that Count Alucard is not known at the Hungarian embassy.
You must be very proud of that bit of snooping.
And you should be a little more concerned about the guy you're expecting who doesn't actually exist. As if that wasn't enough, her father is found dead in his room. And when Alucard finally does show up demanding to be seen, no one is suspicious. Well, okay, Brewster is, as he's trying to find out his connection to Dracula.
According to the legends of my people, the last Count Dracula became one of the undead, a vampire, and was finally destroyed in the 19th century. In Transylvania, the name is associated only with evil.
Okay, one, the 19th century thing only applies to the book, not the Universal movie, which was updated to 1991. And two, Transylvania sees Vlad III as something of a national hero, so you suck as a historian. Clara and Brewster discuss Alucard's involvement in the situation, noticing his luggage is empty and that Catherine is up to something, playing Frank for a fool. Such a fool that in the next scene, Alucard and Catherine get married in secret. To say that Frank isn't pleased is an understatement.
You're going back to town with me tonight. In the morning, you'll take the first train out. Kay will have the marriage annulled, and if you try to stop her or show up in this part of the country again, you'll be jailed.
Well, that could have gone better. Frank confesses to Brewster what happened, though when Brewster goes to investigate, he finds that Catherine is fine and in bed, and not suspicious at all.
You see, I'm engaged in some scientific research. It will take up all of our daylight hours.
And we'll have no time for social life.
We want you to explain this to Claire.
And to Frank. I'm fond of Frank. But of course he must never come here again. I'd like you to tell all our friends not to come.
Oh, I'm sorry. I meant completely suspicious. The next morning, Frank, Brewster, and the police investigate the premise and find Catherine in a coffin. Understandably, the police keep Frank in custody while Brewster meets with one Dr. Laszlo, who explains what a vampire is. Universal? We're 3 movies in. I think we know what a vampire is. Alucard shows up, and we get a repeat of that scene from the first film when Van Helsing warded off Dracula with a cross. Well, that accomplished jack. The following scene, however, is much more useful, when the now vampirized Catherine confronts Frank in his prison cell.
It's so incredible.
Perhaps you'll understand when I tell you Count Alucard's real name is Count Dracula.
Really? Son of Kong, son of Frankenstein, son of Godzilla, son of the Pink Panther, son of Sadar. Those movies had the eponymous sons. This movie is credited for having a character that it doesn't actually have. So it seems that Catherine has punked Dracula himself into making herself immortal, with the intent on doing the same for Frank, so the two of them can be together.
Forever!
Not that Frank has much of a choice, since Catherine took the opportunity to bite Frank while he was sleeping. She tells him how to beat Dracula, and suggests killing Brewster and Claire as well because they know too much. Wait, who was the main villain of this movie again? Frank manages to escape the police and confronts Dracula, who flips his shit when he sees that Frank took the time to burn his coffin beforehand. Are we sure this guy is actually Dracula? He's getting fooled by everyone. And after a silly face contest between the two, the sun rises, dissolving Dracula away into nothing. Brewster, Laszlo, and the sheriff stumble upon the remains and eventually find Frank in the crypts, having already destroyed Catherine. Oh, and at the end of the credits, we are encouraged to buy war bonds. Well, I did go over to the theater to do just that, but apparently they didn't have any. How are the troops going to beat the Nazis without the support back here home? While Universal was able to keep making movies of the Wolfman and Frankenstein with some level of dignity, I can't say the same for Dracula. True, the book was anticlimactic as well, but as these movies went along, Dracula became easier and easier to defeat. In House of Frankenstein and House of Dracula, he doesn't even last past the second act of either film. And this was just the middle ground of that. Alucard, Dracula, wasn't very sinister, getting outwitted by everyone. Something tells me that if Frank didn't get to the coffin first, Brewster probably would have gotten there a few minutes later and would have succeeded anyway. Or would have been betrayed by Catherine, who turns out to be the actual villain of the film. Maybe Lon Chaney Jr. just was the wrong person for the role. Maybe it's the fact that the continuity is never Universal's strongest point. Maybe it's the repeated plot points. Either way, it feels like this sequel is just tired. Whenever Alucard appears in fiction, he tends to actually be Dracula's son. The early Castlevania games come to mind. Which makes this kind of awkward. This movie is credited for things that it didn't actually do. Though admittedly this did have the first bat transformation in a vampire movie. And thankfully Frank wasn't the generic universal love interest we had back in Ghost of Frankenstein and others. Yeah, you see, there's a reason I was wiping my hands when this started. See, "Begone, foul beast of the night!" Yeah, his buddy didn't approve of what I did. Of course, he can't come in because he's not invited in. See what I mean about the diminishing threat of vampires? This might take a while. I'll see you next time.